Hello there, this is Alexander from ScienceQuest.net, and today we're going to talk about a really cool production technique that you probably never heard of. So there is an incredible podcast called Tape Notes where famous artists talk about their production process, and you can find so many cool tips and tricks that you can also use in your productions. So there is this one episode where they have like one of my favorite artists ever, Bonobo, and he's talking about how he created a specific sound for his track Sapien.
So I have Rhodes in my studio, and I sent it through these low-pass gates, which were like sequenced. So it was a make noise low-pass gate sequenced by something else from Eurorack. But what I really liked about it was having this playing Rhodes through the sequence in real time. So as the decays of the notes, and of course you can like hold these big sort of polyphonic textural notes, but as they're decaying, they're still being sequenced, and you can kind of overlap different notes and just kind of keep everything very loose and polyphonic, but it's still going to exist within this sort of sequenced structure. So it's kind of the sequence stays the same. The sequence is always kind of going along, and it's just how you interact with that sequence on the piano, basically. So as you're playing the Rhodes, it's gonna get triggered by this modular low pass sequence.
His explanation on how he did that sparked my interest, not only to recreate that sound, but also talk about a topic that not a lot of people talk about, and that is separating pitch and rhythm. I'm going to explain everything, I promise. So first, let's try and recreate the exact same patch that Bonobo used, and afterwards we'll go into more complex and weirder territories, exploring how separating your pitch information, your note information, and your gate signals or your rhythm can lead to some really interesting results. So to start with the Sapien patch, Bonobo says he's using a Rhodes piano, which unfortunately I don't have, but what I do have is the second best thing to owning an actual Rhodes piano, and that is the official Rhodes plugins. Today we're going to use the Rhodes Anthology plugin plus the V8 plugin, that both sound incredible, and they're just the best Rhodes plugins you can find right now. On top of that, we're gonna need a modular system, which I obviously have, and a very specific type of module called a low-pass gate. Bonobo says he's using a make noise low-pass gate, probably the DXG, or another make noise low-pass gate. But since I don't have this module, so I'm gonna use the Doepfer A101-2 low-pass gate, which I went out and bought after watching this video in order to create that sound. Lastly, we will also need a gate sequencer, and for that we're going to use the almighty Oxy one. Okay, so now let's do a quick explanation of what these things are, because many of you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. If you do know what I'm talking about, you can skip to the next chapter. So what is a gate signal? In modular, gate signals are just some pings, some really short signals that we're using to trigger stuff. Most of the time we're using a gate signal to trigger an envelope so we can hear our sound source. On any conventional synthesizer, you've probably never seen the term gate or a gate signal, because this is already pre-wired to work with the keyboard. So every time you press a key on a synthesizer, you're not only sending the pitch information to the oscillators, but you're also sending a gate signal to trigger the amp envelope so you can hear what you're playing. Gate signals can be used in numerous ways. Another common one is to also trigger a filter envelope so you can have an envelope for your filter, but we're not going to talk about gate signals today. What is a low-pass gate? A low-pass gate is very similar to a low-pass filter. Their main difference that totally sets them apart is that the low-pass gate also has a VCA built in, or even better, like something like an amp envelope built in. So you can use a single gate signal to trigger both the filter envelope and the amp envelope and hear a sound. We're not going to get into too much detail, but the main characteristic of a low-pass gate is that it has a really percussive and rhythmic tone to it. Now that we got this out of the way, let's just try and recreate the Bonobo patch for Sapien. Okay, so now we're gonna try and recreate the same patch that Bonobo did, and we're gonna use, as we said, the Rhodes plugins for that. We have here our Rhodes sound. Really lovely plugin, and what he's doing is that he's playing his Rhodes piano live, and then he's using the modular to trigger, the low pass gate. So the signal flow is that we're taking the Rhodes from Ableton Live and we're routing it into the modular, and then we're patching it into the audio in of the low pass gate. Then we get the output of the low pass gate and we're putting that into our output module and then back into Ableton Live. And the final thing that we're going to need is the Oxy 1 that is going to create a gate sequence. I just have a gate here patched, and I'm using that to trigger an envelope that is triggering the low pass gate. So if I play without the gate sequence and I have the filter open, I can listen to what I'm playing. But if I close the filter, I'm not hearing a thing. And now we're going to start the sequence. And we're not going to hear anything because we're just triggering the low pass gate, but we don't have any sound going into this module. So when I start playing the Rhodes, you're going to hear what he's doing with the low pass gate. That's such a really cool sound, such a really cool technique to get a simple chord progression and create a rhythmical pattern. I really like the simplicity of it. I really like that it's really, really effective, and it gets anything and turns it into something really percussive and rhythmic. This really simple patch gives such a unique character and percussive nature to your sounds. The core idea is that you're not hearing the notes as I play them on the piano, but you're hearing the notes when they're triggered by the gate sequence that I have on the Oxy 1. So we're essentially separating our pitch information and our rhythm. I can have any rhythm playing on the Oxy 1, and I can also play on the Rhodes piano, and you have a different, sequence of pitches and a different sequence of triggers. And by doing that, you have the freedom of differentiating your rhythm to your playing. Once I first started experimenting with modular, I explored this concept in numerous ways. So the core idea is that you have a melodic sequence playing, but then you can use different gate signals to differentiate the rhythm. Your oscillators will always maintain their last pitch, so you can use the gate signals to trigger those pitches anytime you want. At first glance, this trick might seem pointless, but trust me, it has a few very useful applications. Example number 1 is to create B sections of your original melody. Once you have your core melody and your chord progressions set up, you can use this trick to create variations in B sections. And those variations are going to maintain the same melodic vibe of the original melody. Okay, so for our second example, we're going to use just a simple melody using an oscillator from the modular. We're going to use the Castor and Pollux 2 by Winterbloom, which sadly went out of business, and one of my favorite companies, so shout out to them. I really hope we can see some more modules from them. So what are we doing here? We have just a simple sequence playing using one oscillator going into the low pass gate, but for this example and the technique of separating your pitch and your rhythm, you can just use whatever you have. It doesn't matter if it is a low pass gate. You can just use an envelope and a VCA or whatever you have. So now I'm just taking the output of the oscillator into the low pass gate, then out of the low pass gate into my VCA, my mixer, which is the Aikido, and then I'm triggering the low pass gate with the Oxy 1. So here on the Oxy 1 we just have a simple sequence that we're going to use to demonstrate that. Let's hear that. So that's our sequence going through the low pass gate, and I'm using the gate 3 to trigger the low pass gate. So now that we have our melody and rhythm set, we can just take another gate sequence. So I'm using sequence number 4, and we're going to change the gate, and we're going to trigger our oscillator. So if I change that here, you will immediately hear that we have a completely different rhythm, but we're using the exact same notes that we had on sequence number 3. So now you can see that just by using the gate, I have the same melodic content, but a completely different rhythm. The cool thing about oscillators is that they maintain their pitch. So if I just take that and patch it right here, you can hear that it has a constant pitch that changes if I use this sequence. So I'm using that so I can take advantage of another gate signal and have a melody going while I do that. Another application is to use samples. Instead of chopping a sample in your sampler like we usually do, you can use this trick and trigger different parts of the sample in any rhythmical way you want, and also have an envelope applied to that. I'm just going to use the sequence I made on the OPXY and take that, fit it into the low pass gate, and then trigger it using a gate sequence from the Oxy 1 or whatever gate sequencer you have. So I'm going to play the OPXY now so you can hear it without the gate sequence. So this is our sample, this is our melody that we have right here on the OPXY. So now if I close the filter on the low pass gate, I'm not hearing a thing, but I can trigger that again using, let's use the same gate sequence we used before. So now you will hear it takes different parts of the sample of the melody and plays them back rhythmically as we heard before. So instead of using the OPXY, you can use any sample. You can take any sample from your laptop and feed it into a low pass gate and then trigger it with a gate sequencer. That is really inspiring, really creative, and you can use it to create B sections. You can use it to chop samples in a really rhythmical way. It's a great technique to try out. I highly recommend it. And lastly, that's a really great way to remix songs. When I usually do a remix, I first play the entire song, all the melodies, all the chord progressions, all the bass lines, so I can have the foundation of my song. And then after I have all my parts ready, I start to create variations and change them. Now, by using this tip, you can create completely different patterns, but always staying in the same melodic context of the original track. So to wrap things up, I believe that this technique can help you become more intentional about your rhythms and your groove. Melody is one thing and your rhythm is another thing, and when you separate those two things, you have all the freedom to experiment and create some very interesting patterns. So thank you so much for being here. I really hope you found this video helpful. If you did, leave a like or subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comments, and I hope to see you on the next one. Love ya.